Hey everyone, this is Dr. Shay. I just wanted to record a super brief big picture overview of the 6 things to look for when you're going through a fatty acid analysis. The reason why I'm recording this little snippet before to tag on the beginning of the big interview I did with Dr. Kalish on the fatty acids is that in the beginning I think I muddled a lot of concepts and just went way too technical way too quickly. And so I just wanted to record this very simple 6-point checklist of what you're looking for in a fatty acid analysis for Genova's ion panel. So first concept is if fats in the progression of what conversion of one fatty acid to another, if fats go from low to high, and by jumping too quickly, if they jump by 2 statistical quintiles or more, then there's something off there. So if they go from low to high by 2 quintiles or more, that means it's a supplementation issue. So if someone goes from a first quintile ALA to a fourth or fifth quintile EPA, that's someone supplementing with fish oil, for example. The second concept is that if in the progression something goes from high to low, meaning more than 2 quintile difference, like if someone's LA goes from fifth quintile down to first quintile in one enzymatic step from, say, LA to GLA, like my case study is, that's an enzyme block. So there's a buildup in the fatty acid, and it can't progress to the next step because the enzyme is blocked because it needs cofactors, usually B vitamins. Depending on which one it is, it could be B vitamins or B vitamins plus zinc, magnesium, and vitamin C, or just B vitamins and vitamin C. So that's the second concept, from high to low, 2 quintiles or more, it's an enzyme block. The third concept is that if all the fats are globally low, that's a digestion issue. They're not able to absorb fat, and that's what's they're not absorbing it through their intestines, so it's not showing up in the blood. So that's the third concept. The fourth concept is lipid peroxides being high. Now they could be high, like in the fifth quintile or higher, or they can appear to be normal, but if the fats are globally low, then the relative difference between the fats and the peroxides is relatively high, because if you move the fats up from low to normal, then the peroxides would go with it and they'd be high. So if the lipid peroxides are relatively high, again by 2 quintiles or more, then we need to focus on withdrawing fats like flax oil and fish oil from their diet, and instead focus on giving them heavy antioxidants to calm down the lipid peroxides and calm down the free radical damage. The fifth concept is for all the more obscure fats outside of like omega-6s and omega-3s and so on, just use Dr. Lord's charts, whether that's in the ion panel or organics interpretation guides from Genova or from Dr. Lord's book. Like don't sweat all the nuances of the other more obscure fatty acids. Just look at the charts and just use common sense. And then the last thing to look for is the less than sign of palmitate, which is a specific big picture viewpoint of fatty acids. It's a very specific sign to look for that's very, very meaningful. So, but that's the second. We'll talk about that in the last part of the presentation. So those are the 6 big picture concepts. When fats go from low to high, and by at least a 2 quintile jump, that's supplements. If they go from high to low by at least a 2 quintile jump, that's an enzyme block. If the fats are globally low, it's poor fat digestion. If the lipid peroxides are high relative to fats, that's they're cooking their fats way too high. They're too much free radical damage. Use Dr. Lord's book or the interpretation guides for all the more obscure fats, and then check for the minus sign of palmitate. And that's the big picture of how to interpret the fatty acids. I hope that helps. Welcome, everyone. My name is Dr. Sam Shay. I'm going to be teaching how I figured out a methodology to interpret the fatty acids on Genova's ion panel. Everything I learned, I'm showing here, was taught to me and inspired by Dr. Kalish, his Kalish Institute, and by proxy from Dr. Lord. And I'll show some specific things from Dr. Lord's books that come in handy a lot as part of this interpretation. So the reason I got started on looking at essential fatty acids is that I was totally confused and overwhelmed, and it was a big, chunky section of the ion panel, and I didn't feel confident in interpreting it. And I looked at all these different charts. This is just one example. This is from the Institute for Functional Medicine of one of the many different types of charts that show just the omega-3 to omega-6 family. And they're showing in here the common enzymes. That.
Oh, Sam, we
Yeah?
still have the title slide on.
What? It didn't move?
No.
Huh. That's strange. Why didn't it move?
Now it moved.
Oh, now it moved? Okay. So what I'll do, so what that means is that when I go full screen, I guess when I go full screen, it doesn't track along with the full screen. Okay, no problem. So so when looking at the fatty acids and the progressions of what these fatty acids go from one thing to the next, you see that there's common enzymes and that go between omega-3 and omega-6. Now the problem is knowing which ones do what, and it gets confusing and overwhelming, and more importantly, the ion panel doesn't report all the different fatty acids in these steps, and that's super confusing. It's very, very confusing because you would think that a lab test would show one step to the next, to the next, to the next uninterrupted, but that's not true. Additionally, you see other problems like common naming, like docosapentanoic acid is here in the omega-3 pathway as well as here in the omega-6 pathway. So the naming gets confusing, and what I had to do was I went through the ion panel and actually analyzed what fatty acids were in what were in the pathway. So what I did, so this is an example here of the first page of the ion panel. These first four are the omega-3s. These are then the omega-6s. Then we got the omega-9s and the monosaturated. And you'd think that these would all go in the same order, but they don't. And one reason that you can tell that is that if you look closely here, this is how, this is 18:2N6. So the 18 is the carbon length. The 2N6 is the omega number. That's the location of where the double bond is, and how many double bonds and where it starts. And an enzyme changes one number at a time. So 18:26, one enzymatic step goes 18:3N6. And then if you go here to number 7, it changes from 18 to 20, but 3 back to 2, which makes no sense. So they're not actually reporting these numbers in the actual order that you see on, say, this chart. So that's why this thing is very confusing. So what I did is I went and made this spreadsheet, and this spreadsheet's available on the in the back end, the online community platform at the Kalish Institute. So what I did is I went through and put, I just have to walk through it a little bit. So this column here, this is the omega-3 pathway. This column in green is the omega-6 pathway. This is the omega-9 pathway. And the salmon color is the omega-7 pathway. And then on the x-axis, I show where the enzymes are, because these enzymes have common, these progressions share common enzymes. So delta 9 desaturase is only in the omega-9 omega-7 pathway, converting marker 23 into marker 16 and marker 20 marker 14, and the common enzyme is the cofactor is iron. So when we look at the omega-3 pathway, which is here, these first four, but it's showing marker number 1 is ALA. Then there's a delta 6 desaturase, which converts it into stearidonic acid, and in the case of LA to GLA, converts it into GLA. But Genova doesn't report that middle step. So I just kind of, okay, fine. So then I jump down, and then it jumps down to here with the omega-3 pathway. You see the transition using delta 5 desaturase into EPA, then the elongase into docosahexaenoic acid, and then finally D4D into DHA. So what I've done is I've made these red blocks here are what quintile number you put. So, for example, here we have ALA start. This is actually my fatty acid profile, the one I did a while ago. This shows ALA in the first quintile, EPA in the fourth quintile, DSA in the third quintile, and DHA in the fourth quintile. And then you have LA in the fifth quintile, GLA in the first quintile, then DGLA here that's low, arachidonic in the second, and then the marker 11 in the first ones. And so here we go. I put first quintile here because ALA is there. Then I have fourth quintile, third quintile, fourth quintile. Why is this important? Because if you go from a first quintile and you jump up, this is due to supplementation. You should have only one quintile difference, if any, between one transitionary step along the pathway. But if you go from a low quintile to a high quintile, that means supplementation. In my case, it was fish oil, which makes total sense. And you can see that here. First quintile to fourth to third to fourth. If you follow the omega-6 pathway, which is the only pathway that's continuous on the ion panel, it goes marker number 5, marker number 6, then marker number 8, then 9, then 11. So fifth quintile, first quintile, then it jumps down to first quintile GLA, which you see here, fifth quintile to first quintile. Then marker number 8 is low, right there, and then it goes. Then marker number 9 is in the second quintile. It jumps up, and then marker number 11 is the first. So what we're seeing here is the quintile differences in order of the actual pathway, because it can appear that it goes fifth to first to load this, and then it jumps up to the fifth. But this is inaccurate because arachidonic, this difference from here to here doesn't happen in order. So we're not seeing it like it's missing an enzyme step here. So what we see, so in this chart, I just literally go through omega-3s. Marker 1, I put in the number. Marker 2, I put in the quintile number. Marker 3, I put in the quintile number. Marker 4, I put in the quintile number. Same thing with omega-6s. So what this shows is that I went from a fifth quintile to a first quintile, which shows that this is an enzyme block issue, not a supplement issue. If people see this and they think, oh, I'm low in GLA, I should supplement with GLA, that's incorrect. If you have over a 2 quintile difference between one sequential enzymatic step, that's an enzyme block, not a supplement, not a fatty acid deficiency. So what I've done here is I've shown on this left-hand column, delta 6 desaturase is the common enzyme across all of these fatty acid progressions. So if you see more than a 2 quintile difference, like this is fifth to a first, that's a 4 quintile difference, you know that you need to supplement with high-dose B vitamins, magnesium, zinc, and vitamin C. Whereas if it's jumping up from a first quintile up a couple quintiles over 2, this is actually a supplementation jump. And so for me, I was actually deficient in ALA. And so I do need to supplement with ALA here. It's not an enzyme issue going from ALA to EPA. It's I'm low in ALA, and I'm getting my EPA DHA not because I'm converting the ALA into here. It's that I'm supplementing fish oil, which I was. So that's the intention of this chart, is to show where is the enzyme block. In this case, it's delta 6 desaturated. So I know that I just need to supplement with these cofactors and coenzymes. So let me, and I'm also showing here how, unfortunately, the way this is reported, it's not in accurate order visually here, which is why I had to make the chart and put in these, in blue, these marker numbers, so that you can put in the correct quintile to then see what's actually going on with the fatty acids. So let me just pause there, and ask you, Dr. Kalish, like, what if you have any comments on this?
Yeah, that is super helpful. I wonder if is there like a sort of a cheat sheet or like a quick reference guide that you could think of that shows the ones that you've seen the most often in your own practice?
The ones I'm going to show you, the ones I see the most often. I mean, the ones I've seen are basically, it's once, like, because this spreadsheet is available for people to just cut and paste, like, they just download it, and then they just, per patient, they just duplicate it and put the name on it. And once you get this spreadsheet's actually really, it's really straightforward. I mean, I know it's complicated to look at, but you just literally put in the quintiles. And what you see most common is either an elongase block or a delta 6 desaturase block, or people who are low in iron, you see a delta 9 desaturase block, like high stearic acid or palmitic and very low oleic acid and palmitoleic. Or a delta 5. There's not really that many patterns. That's the thing. There's really not that many patterns at all. It's someone's over supplementing, they have a genuine deficiency in a particular fatty acid, or it's an enzyme block, and that's it. Like for this particular pattern set, there's some other issues that show up that have to do with dealing with absorption issues. If it's low amino acids low fatty acids across the board, or you got a lipid peroxidase free radical issue, but there's really not that many patterns, truly.
Yeah.
So this chart was an attempt to make this practical and this logical in order, because these things were not in order. It was so confusing. I had to literally sit there, and ultimately the simplest way to come up with was making a chart, and all you have to do is plug in the quintiles and see, does it go from low to high or high to low. If it only is a difference of 1 quintile from one thing to the next, then it's normal. But if it's a 2 quintile or more difference, then it's abnormal, either from an enzyme block or from supplementation. That's probably should have been the one-sentence summary at the beginning.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense.
Yeah, I should probably clip that and put that
and
at the
it's easy.
beginning.
Well, I guess not easy, but if you're supplementing, it's going up. If you have an enzyme block, it's going to be dropping, right?
Dropping, right, yeah, there we go. And so that's what the chart is for. Because just to sit there and try to figure this all out from this thing is not really that straightforward. So, cause even here, you can see it can look confusing. Like it would jump up or jump down, and it's just not the case. So this is.
Can I say one other thing? And this is
Sure.
doubly confusing because it's the exact opposite of organic acids, where when there's a genetic defect, the organic acid marker goes up, right?
Yeah.
In this case, with a genetic defect in an enzyme, the marker is going to drop.
Correct. Yeah, that is confusing. I think that the only saving grace is that when we think of it with the only saving grace is that we have a chart to track it all. And here, this is actually my fatty acids. And in this one screenshot, you can see both happening at the same time. Supplementation issue from low to high, and enzyme issue from high to low.
Perfect.
So then I'm going to show also what I did to correct that. So this section, I call the 5 reasons to pull someone off fish oil, which you can identify all these reasons based on the fatty acid profile. And through these 5 reasons, we're going to highlight some other things that are really important to catch in the fatty acid profile. So one is that there's poor quality fish oil. It's either rancid, or there's bad mercury content or PCBs, and there's controversy over whose fish oil is best. And this is really a thing to talk to one's clients and patients about why it's important that they buy high quality fish oil from a practitioner level only company, and because you don't want them taking in toxins along with their fish oil. That's really, really important. The second issue is they have poor absorption of fats. So this is a real client of mine that I'm pointing out here, this is his stool test showing green stool color, fat globules, and then over here, over double the long chain fatty acids in his stool, not his blood, his stool, and about double his phospholipids. So he's pooping out fat. His bile function is not working, and you've got multiple markers on different stool tests. This happens to be a CDSA test from Nutripath in Australia, but you have the steatocrit markers on the GI map. You have the fatty acid, the butyrate and the other fat markers on GIFX. Like all the different stool test companies have their own fat markers. So on this client, there's a pattern here of globally low fats. Now, when I see globally low fats, and like literally low, 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 one high, this one's a weird one. I don't have any explanation for that. But the pattern is what's important, not this outlier. When someone has low, low, low across the board, I immediately jump to checking the stool test to see, is this an absorption issue, or is this a fatty, or their absorption is fine, are they just not having enough fats to be absorbed? So in this case, this guy was not absorbing his fats. So if I were to give him high-dose fish oil and flax oil and all the rest, it'd be a total waste of his money because he just poop it out. Complete waste of his money. So what I did is I focused on his digestion first, not reconstituting his fatty acids. That's what I focused on. And so I'm showing you the difference. This is his comparative test from February 2018 to February 2019, was 12 months. So initially it was about improving fat digestion, adding in high antioxidants, and removing his fish and flax oil. Why did I add in high antioxidants? Because the other issue we're going to run into is high lipid peroxidases. So this is the third reason to pull someone off of fish oils. So if someone has lipid peroxides, high lipid peroxides, that's a typo right there. It should be lipid peroxides, not peroxidase. What the lipid peroxides are, that's the measure of how damaged your fats are in the blood. So just like you don't add oil to an overly hot frying pan because it's going to smoke, you don't add oil to a human body where they're effectively like an overheated frying pan. So it's dangerous to add like concentrated fats like fish oils and flax oils to someone who quickly converts them into lipid peroxides. Now here, this person's lipid peroxides are like smack in the middle, third quintile, so you'd think, oh, he's totally fine with lipid peroxides, he's normal, he's in the middle of the bell curve. That's not actually true relative to the amount of total fats in his blood. So if he has, on average, first quintile fatty acids, but he has third quintile lipid peroxides, what that means, if we were to correct these fatty acids so they'd shift all over to the third quintile, that means statistically the lipid peroxides would shift over 2 quintiles into high. So he actually has high fatty acid oxidation. He has high free radical damage to his fats relative to his total fats. That's why I focused on adding high antioxidants at first, in order to try to keep this thing in check while we bring this up into normalcy. So as you can see, 12 months later, his lipid peroxides are literally the same, 1.28. And his fatty acids have moved out of the low zone. They've all moved up by approximately 1 or so quintiles. Then we continued the treatment, and this is a comparison from February 2019 to 8 months later to November 2019. And you can see his lipid peroxides stayed almost exactly the same, just a 0.01 difference. What I did this time was continued with supporting fat digestion, continued with high antioxidants, but now decided to add in fish oil and flax oil. And you can see the difference. He jumped to basically statistically near perfect, almost near perfect. We continued to improve his digestion, continued to add in fat-soluble antioxidants, and then added in the fish oil and flax oil. And this is like, I couldn't imagine a better result from this particular protocol. So this is what I learned from you, Dr. Kalish. And so we have a 20-month progression here showing the improvement and highlighting really important concepts of tracking the lipid peroxides relative to the total number of fats. And just to show what his type of fat-soluble vitamins we're talking about, this is another page off the ion panel. The reason, one clue that he needed support with his fat-soluble vitamins is that his CoQ10 was in the first quintile. Now, another point of possible confusion is that when we're looking at the organic acids, we're looking at a pattern of things in the first quintile or lower, whereas in the fat-soluble vitamins, if any one of them is low, it can make high lipid peroxides. We don't need a pattern of them all to be low to have increased lipid peroxides. We just need at least one of them. So that was one of the tip-offs to corroborate that we need to support his lipid peroxides. Additionally, his vitamin D levels were super low, and I was giving him vitamin D as well as his 8-OH2 deoxyguanosine DG, or 8-OH2 DG, was also high, so I had him on water-soluble antioxidants as well. So that's the third reason to pull someone off fish oils. And you can put them back on just as long as you protect the lipid peroxides. And so the recommendation is build up the fat-soluble antioxidants first, then add in the fish oils and flax oils later. Dr. Kess, do you have any comments you want to add to this at all?
No, that's really well put.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So the fourth reason to pull someone off fish oils, and by the way, the reason why I have this thing about pulling people off fish oils is because when I learned about fish oils back in like 1999, never in a million years did I thought that there'd be any reason to pull someone off of fish oils. Because at the time, we were all taught fish oils is the most amazing thing ever. There's no downside. Everything's great. Kind of like what you hear about CBD now, as we're recording this in 2020. Like, there was no reason given ever to pull someone off fish oils. Maybe like if it was a bad quality fish oil and therefore buy the practitioner level stuff. That was it. But now with testing, like, it totally flipped that script on its head, that there are multiple reasons based on testing to pull people off of fish oils. This is why it's really important to test, not guess, and not just throw fish oils at everyone you see. You actually want to do testing on this. So the fourth reason to pull someone on fish oils is that they're already high. They're already like fourth or fifth quintile or higher. I've actually very rarely seen EPA and DHA above fourth quintile. I don't know if you've seen it much, Dr. Kalish, but I've almost never seen it.
Yeah, I don't think it's that common.
Yeah. So then the fifth issue to pull someone off of an exogenous oil, whether it's flax oil or fish oil or anything, is what we talked about before, is that they don't need it. they just need to fix the enzymes. Like this is again my third quintile difference. This is my fatty acids, and I don't have a GLA deficiency. I have an enzyme block, so I shouldn't be taking LA here. I should be taking what's needed to fix the delta 6 desaturase. Now, you can see this also if LA is fifth quintile. I couldn't find an example in my files, but just to make it like so it's relative to fish oil, if ALA was in the fifth quintile here, and EPA and DHA were in the first quintile, I would be looking at the enzyme, not necessarily supplementation. I think in the case of EPA and DHA, like some people, they just have really slow enzymatic conversions to convert ALA down the chain to EPA, DHA. So supplementation may absolutely be necessary, but we do want to support that enzyme first to see if we can just pull things out of ALA and push it down the chain. So those are the 5 reasons to pull people off of fish oil. This is again my chart with my fatty acids showing that fifth to first quintile in the omega-6s. It's an enzyme issue, not a fatty acid issue. And then this is a comparison of my ion panel from January 2010 to November 2019. So this is a 10-month difference. And so what I did is I really heavily supported the delta 6 desaturase pathway with B vitamins, magnesium, zinc, and vitamin C. And then later on, I added some hemp oil for ALA, and hemp oil has a tiny amount of GLA. That's a little trick, actually. If you have to increase ALA and GLA, give people hemp oil. And I also cut down my fish oil because I was in the fourth quintile here. And look what happened. These numbers, basically, I have to go back on fish oil, but the ALA normalized, and the LA to GLA completely normalized. I just need to, have some more LA in my diet. But you see, it went from a 4 quintile difference to a 1 quintile difference, which is normal. And then also, like, these other fatty acids started to line up as well. So this is just another example of how this type of analysis and following this methodology, it works. Like I fixed a 4 quintile difference here, which is statistically makes no sense from a normal enzymatic way. How you have 4 quintile difference? It wasn't a GLA deficiency. It was my enzyme was busted. Any comments on this, Dr. Kalish?
Well, I think what's interesting is that another way of thinking, there's so many ways to think about it. One is that individual biochemistry dictates that some people need more of these enzyme cofactors, but they're not, ironically, they're not the fats, right? It's the magnesium or the zinc or the vitamin C.
Or B vitamins, yeah.
So, or B vitamins, right? So, I mean, there's kind of 2 different ways of looking at it. One is like, okay, you're solving a fat metabolism, fat production problem with non-fat related nutrients.
Right.
Another maybe if you go to 30,000 foot view, it just shows that you, Sam, Dr. Sam, have genetic defects which require you to have more magnesium, vitamin C, zinc, and B vitamins in your diet than the average person. But that's manifesting not as a low magnesium or low zinc indicator necessarily. It's indicating it's registering as a defect in fatty acids, which is kind of crazy when you think about how, you know what I mean? Because it's like the solution is not anywhere near where you see the problem as being. That's what I'm trying to say. And in fact, if you have if we could someday in the world of personalized nutrition have a chart for each human being, and it would simply say, these are the nutrients that I am prone to become. No, these are the nutrients that I need more than the average person needs, and more than I could perhaps get from my diet. And if magnesium, B vitamins, zinc, vitamin C were on that list, in your case it would be affecting fatty acids. In someone else's case, those same nutrients could be affecting mitochondria, right? But the commonality is the SNP that's behind all this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. And I would add that there's a third element, which is the digestion. Is that a person's messed up fatty acids may have nothing to do with, he could be taking all the fatty acids in the world, but if he's not absorbing them, then he's in trouble. Like this particular client, this is the guy, like this person, he went to in his profession, he went to a giant conference, and I got about 6 different referrals just from him going to that conference because people were walking up to him saying his skin looked 10 years younger than when they remembered him from last year. So when you fix the fatty acids, what's the most prominent organ that is visible about fatty acids? It's the skin. So it was amazing. Like I got so many people just from him walking around this conference. It's like, what the heck happened to you, man? You look 10 years younger. So it was just fixing his fatty acids. First fixing his digestion, and then slowly, safely, balancing it all out, making sure liquid peroxides were normal.
Yeah. It's in some ways it's super high level thinking, but in some ways it's like what could be more fundamental than fixing the fat, right? I mean, fixing protein, fixing fat. I mean, it's like at the same time it seems so complicated. It's as fundamental as you could possibly get in terms of all the work that we do.
Yeah, I thought of the fatty acids profile as like the background radiation on which all physiology manifests. Because it's the membranes. Like there's the amino acids are super critical, but everything is bounded by the fatty acid membrane, and everything is dictated by that. And so it's like balancing out the fatty acids to me is just so foundational. And the reality is like just with this big picture overview, it's a lot of detail, but it's not terribly complicated. It's like they either have an enzyme block, they're deficient in something, they're over-supplementing, their digestion is off, they have crappy supplements. That's about it. It's not, and it's just figuring out which ones they are, and then you just they've got their body is a frying pan, and we need to make sure they got enough fat-soluble antioxidants. That's about it. There's not that many patterns. From the big picture standpoint. Of course, we can nuance forever on the individual fatty acids, but those are really the 5 main patterns that I saw.
Yeah, it's also interesting to me in the last few years since I've learned how to do this, how much clinical benefit you can get for anxiety, depression, skin problems, fertility problems. You think of all the other things that fatty acids do: brain regulation, hormones, production, and as well as the entire body effect of every cell membrane, right? So you've got this global correction that's going to affect literally every cell in the body by changing the fluidity and function of the membrane.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you've got these specific areas that are targeted too, like neurotransmitter function and production and brain, the ability of the brain to conduct signals and hormone production, all the hormones, the steroid hormones made from fat, the inflammatory process, and eicosanoids. I mean, just for that alone, just for prostaglandin, alone, prostaglandin levels alone, and immune and inflammatory regulation, it's just so foundational. But like you, for 20 years, I literally for 20 years just put everybody on a path that had 2 grams of fish oils, and then considered the whole fatty acid thing was, that's okay, no, we got that covered.
Yeah, I know. I'm guilty of that too. Yep, I'm guilty of that. Yep. So now with testing, we know better, and live and learn. That's why we call it a practice. We've got only a couple of things. There's only a couple of things left. There's kind of nuancy little things, which is really just about just checking Dr. Lord's book. So Dr. Lord has his book, Handbook of Human Nutrient Assessments, that's available on Apple Books. And and there's different, that's the most updated part. I mean, of course, Genova has their interpretation guides and all the rest of it, and he's got lots of books coming out and always and adding more to this. But he's got these wonderful little charts, and they're really useful for the more obscure level fatty acids. And so I'm just going to highlight a couple. Um, one is one is mead, which looking at long-term essential fatty acid deficiency. So if someone's really high in mead, that means they've had a long-term essential fatty acid deficiency. Now, what can be confusing is that if the omega-3s are normal or high, but this thing is also high, it's like, well, how is that possible? Because he has high omega-3s, how could he have a long-term, EPA, DHA deficiency? Because through short-term heavy dose supplementation, you can spike the amount of EPA, DHA in your blood, but that doesn't mean it's suffused itself with your membranes and everything else throughout your body. So that's, am I explaining that correctly, Dr. Kalish? You're the one who taught me that. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's mead. And also the reverse is true. If you have a good level of mead but low EPA, DHA, then that means that you have low EPA, DHA in your blood, but it hasn't become this chronic, deficient, terrible systemic thing yet. Yet being the operative word. So it means it's prudent to fix the omega-3s, but it hasn't become this long-term chronic thing. Then for the rest of these fatty acids, really, it's just going down the line of Dr. Lord's chart. It's like, okay, if there's high markers, then what does that mean? Now, the one thing that I haven't found, whether it's in Dr. Lord's book or elsewhere, is what happens when these things are low. And that's the one thing that I'm still not clear on, and I haven't gotten a clean answer from Genova yet, is what happens when these things are low, but there's no indication on their interpretation guide or elsewhere what it means when it's low, and particularly when they indicate it with a two-tail, red-yellow indicator here that something bad must be here when it's low, but I have no indication of what that actually means. So when it comes to working with a patient or a client and they've got these kind of weird results and they ask, well, what does it mean when it's low? It's in the red and the yellow. Here's my literal response. It's not as well researched as we know, but the most important things we're going to correct that affects everything in your physiology are these bigger numbers up here. So we're just going to focus on these because they're honestly the most important. And that's how I address it with a patient or a client. It's like, it's not really that well known what it means low, but don't worry because the big important stuff's up here. So do you have any insight? I mean, what do you tell patients, Dr. Kalish, when you have these markers there?
We're talking about
we're talking about like the monounsaturated, like the myristoylic, the palmitoleic, especially when they're indicated low. Well, and there's nothing in any of the interpretation guides or the other books that show what does it mean when it's low.
Yeah, I haven't taught that class yet, so there's a whole other thing with these being low.
Oh, okay, so that's coming up.
Did we talk about it with palmitic on the next page?
But this is palmitoleic, not palmitic. Palmitic is coming up on the next page.
Let me talk to Dr. Lord about that because there's something there that I don't totally understand yet myself. But
yeah, we're gonna get to the saturated stuff in a second. It's just some of these markers have two tails on their statistical quintiles, but there's no explanation as to what the other tail is when it's in that area, like it's low here and there's nothing indicating.
Yeah, let me check in with him on that, on a quick answer.
Sure.
I think there's a long answer and a short answer.
Okay. So then the next page is just going through the rest of them. Now, some of these things I just want to comment on. MAD, that's a specific genetic deficiency where these saturated fats are like I'm not looking for these unless all three of them are super crazy high. This like really obscure genetic disease. But one thing I want to warn people on is lauric acid. I've seen lauric acid double in this, but everything else was normal. And that's from people just overdosing on coconut oil. That's what I've seen. Whenever I've seen this number super high, I literally say, so how much coconut oil are you downing a day? And then my client chuckles and they admit they've been taking a lot of coconut oil. So I just want to tell people not everything double the upper limit or the fifth quintile is a genetic defect. Like this can be, I've seen this in the 50s and the person was just
downing coconut oil, and it was normal the next time when they cut back on the coconut oil. Then there's, I'm going to come back to the minus sign in a second. That's the next slide. These other markers, like you can check the indications based on the chart here. The odd chain fatty acids, like basically if they're high, it's biotin, B12, and carnitine and dysbiosis. And that's about it. And thankfully, there's all a single tip, red in the high. Trans fats, palmitate, just, watch out, something's high over here in the trans fat area. I just have a talk with my client, or my patients, okay, are you sneaking in trans fats knowingly or unknowingly? Like going out to eat, having their favorite thing, and they have a little snack on the way to work, or are they taking potato chips and they're not telling me, or whatever it is. Then the ratios, like I don't really spend a lot of time with the ratios, simply because if we understand the big picture issues before with with the enzyme block or the overdoing supplementation, or it's an absorption issue or whatever, like these ratios normalize anyway. And we got all the information we need from above. And as, like, for example, if you have a client that's all super low, like the one I showed you, like everything was first quintile or lower, these ratios mean nothing. They mean absolutely nothing. You don't have enough marker. Like my client that had everything super duper low, his ratios were totally messed up, like crazy either end of the spectrum, and he was panicky over that. And I said, don't even bother with the ratios, because you don't have enough fats to even make an accurate ratio make any sense. So yeah, that's basically how I read the rest of the report, is just having the chart there and just double checking things. Now, before I get into the minus sign, is there anything you want to add to this side of to how to read these fatty acids, Dr. Kalish?
No, there's one other random factoid, which is propionate.
Propionate. Where?
Propionic.
Propionic. Where are we? Propionic.
See it in there?
Propionic is on the fat analysis. It's not on the. It's on the stool test. It's not on the fatty acid. There is no.
Yeah, there's one. Oh, okay. I'm thinking about a different report. We'll come back to that later. There's one of these where there's one of these fats that elevates when people consume too much kombucha. I was just thinking about, because you're talking about.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Fascinating.
I'll look that one up for you. I'll get that out to you.
So now let's get into the minus sign. In Palmitate. So this is like a near perfect example of this. So the less than sign here, you can see like a statistical shift, boom, 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 all kind of coming to the point, the point of the less than sign at palmitic acid. And this is real important because palmitic acid is the most abundant fatty acid in the entire report. It ranges from the 600s to the 2500s. The closest thing that comes to it is LA. That comes up to the 2000s. To the 2000s. Sorry, did I say 200s here? From the 600s to the 2500s, yeah. So if this is low, that's really not good, because that's a major fatty acid that's low relative to everything else. And my understanding of this, and please correct me, Dr. Kalish, if I got this wrong, is that there's not enough essential fatty acids, EPA, DHA, to trigger the appropriate transport of palmitic acid into the blood. That you need, like the peroxisomes or what is the transport molecule? Oh God!
It's kind of the reverse of that.
It's the reverse of that?
Yeah.
Am I getting this backwards? Okay. Yeah.
I probably said it wrong in class, but
okay.
The palmitic is the number one endogenously produced fatty acid.
Right.
And so think of it this way, like if your body's making these little, the lipid droplets that's squirting out from the liver that go into the bloodstream, the lipoprotein things, little carriers, right, that are carrying the lipids.
Right.
If your main supply of palmitate is short, you're not going to make as much of that transport mechanism, right?
Right.
Or not, I shouldn't say that's not accurate. You're not going to make as much lipoproteins in general. You're not going to be circulating fats generally because your main reason to do that is minimized because palmitate is such a dominant fat.
Right.
So then the circulation or the supply of 3s and 6s going throughout the body don't arrive where they should, right? Because you don't have enough of the overall fat going out, period.
Got it.
But it's also true, and I think what you're remembering is there's a case that I showed in class where the woman had super low omega-3s and 6s, and by supplying sort of triple dosages of 3s and 6s, we got her this whole engine kicked in through some, I don't think it's a known mechanism, but by using the 3s and 6s, we kicked in the palmitate and reversed the lesser than sign.
I think what I recall was that this lady had psychiatric problems.
Exactly.
And she had psychiatric problems, and it was a membrane fluidity issue. And she couldn't get the working theory was that when you fixed her membrane fluidity, then the transport molecules could freely diffuse across the membranes where they're needed in the body, particularly the brain, which then normalized her psychiatric issues. Am I remembering that correctly?
That is accurate, yeah. And in the course of all that, the lesser than sign, faded literally.
Yeah.
Everything moved 2 quintiles to the right.
Okay, interesting. So, there's, as you've indicated, there's a lot more nuance to the fatty acid profile that awaits us as Dr. Lord and you continue to disseminate information. But the main thing I want people to walk away with from this presentation is basically there's two halves to the there's two parts to the fatty acid interpretation. There's looking at the omega-3s and the omega-6s, the omega-9s, and the omega-7s in terms of the enzymes, and that's really what this chart is for, is to determine, is someone over-supplementing or is there an enzyme block? Then we look at, do we have an indication globally that there is low fatty acid absorption, which is a massive issue to be corrected, and it's a gut issue, not necessarily a fat issue. And then we also have to pay attention on the ion panel to the lipid peroxide marker. That's really important because we don't want to add fragile fish or flax oil to a red-hot frying pan. And so if we see the lipid peroxides statistically 2 quintiles or more higher than about the average of the fatty acids, then we don't want to put them on flax or fish oils. We want to pull them off and put about at least 2 months or so of high-dose fat-soluble vitamins to get the frying pan to cool down a bit. And then we look at kind of everything else, the other fats, kind of down on the more obscure fats that no one really talks about, and just in general look at the comparative charts, understand that lauric acid can spike ridiculously high if someone's overdosing on coconut oil. It doesn't mean that there's an enzyme issue. And then we've got this interesting thing about the minus sign, which turns out is really helped by increasing essential fatty acids to, I guess one of the working theories is to improve the membrane fluidity. Anything else you want to add, Dr. Kalish, before we finish up with? Because I'm done with it.
Yeah, that's an excellent presentation. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
The information there. Yeah.
Yeah, and that took this was many months of trying to put this all together. Being in your class, struggling through what my patients were going through, and trying to figure out what was going on, and I really wanted to understand fatty acids because it truly is like the background radiation in which everything operates. I wish I had a better metaphor than radiation, but whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's about it. Do you have any parting thoughts or comments?
No, this is great. It's super helpful. We'll have to talk about this in class some more too, next time we get into it.
So this chart will be available for people to download. I'm going to send it to be available so people can just download and cut and make duplicates. And I want to thank you, Dr. Kalish, for teaching me all this. And I feel really, really happy to be able to kind of offer it back in just like a slightly different format to kind of share, hopefully, a way that will make things a lot simpler for people with fatty acids.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sam.
All right, thank you, Dr. Kalish. I'm going to stop the recording.